maybe what I went through was normal, but it wasn't healthy,
Yeah.
right? Maybe I'm not being ungrateful by recognizing like my parents couldn't meet my needs. And this isn't like about blaming mom and dad, right? Like, while I'm not excusing what my stepmom did to me, I can also see that she was in a state of survival.
Hey, beautiful. Welcome to Naturally Empowered Living, your safe space to guiding you on your unapologetic self awakening journey. This is your weekly sanctuary for waking up from autopilot and transforming the way you approach life through the power of meditation, energetics, and root cause therapy. It is my mission to help you heal unprocessed emotions and release stuck energies by alchemizing your struggle cycles into opportunities for deep self love, awareness, trust, and connection, to return to your innate essence of being, stepping back into your energy of alignment. Because here, we honor all parts of ourselves, the messy and the magic, the shadows and the light, embodying all parts that make you, you. So if you are ready to get to the root of cultivating real change, get cozy, grab your journal and maybe favorite crystals, and let's discover our power within together. Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Naturally Empowered Living podcast. This is your host, guide, and mentor in all things emotions, energetics, and self awakening, Jenna Smith. And today's guest, I'm so excited to talk to you. She brings both depth and fire to a conversation that so many of us need to hear and that we talk so much about on the show. I'm so excited to welcome Tiffany Toombs Clevinger, a globally recognized expert and international speaker in rewiring the unconscious mind for success and tapping into personal potential. With over 2 decades of experience, she has brought about meaningful change in the lives of individuals worldwide. She is an author for the book Stop Being a Selfish Bitch, a comprehensive guide to living your best life through radical self-love. I'm just like the fire. I read that title and that's why I was like, I have to say fire in this because I'm just like, I love that. And she is the co-host of the podcast, The Cycle Breaker Show. So we are going to dive into a conversation about so much, so much that's just so relatable. I'm so excited to welcome you, Tiffany. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Woohoo! Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself, about, your journey, what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, so I never planned on doing any of this work. I was convinced at one point that I would absolutely be a marine biologist, and then I was convinced in college that I would absolutely be an athletic trainer for sports teams, and that was it. There was nothing else for me. So, um, long story short, it all starts in childhood, as it always does, right?
Yeah.
My mom and my biological dad split when I was 3 months old. And when I was three, he met a woman who was a domestic violence survivor. She was actually living in a women's shelter. I remember like the fresh bruises on her from her last altercation.
Hmm.
And she actually became my abuser. So my childhood was firsthand witness to how hurt people
Gosh.
and how unhealed trauma gets passed down. So I had two very different childhoods. When I was with my mom, my stepdad, my half brothers, love, joking, happiness, joy. My mom did have really intense anxiety, so sometimes she wasn't emotionally there, but for the most part, it was like a very, family first
Yeah.
uh, mentality, some scarcity around money and things, but very family first mentality. Then on every other weekend, when I had to go to my biological dad's house, it was all about survival. It was all about how can I shrink myself more, hide more. She would lock me in closets, burn me with curling irons. For years, she told me that strangers hated blonde haired, blue eyed girls and would kill them if they saw them. And then she would threaten, or she would actually put me in the car, drive me to the outskirts of the city I'm from, and tell me that she was going to leave me there for a stranger to come and find and kill. So, between the ages of like 7 and 10, really, I begged for my life frequently. And then I would go back to mom and dad's house, and it was like, how do I let go of this? I knew my mom had such bad anxiety, and I knew that my biological dad was such a sore conversation in the house that I couldn't bring it up. I couldn't share what was going on. So it was like I had to shoulder this weight. Didn't realize that that led to being an overachieving, people pleasing perfectionist. I was desperate to prove to my stepdad who, by the way, has always treated me like I was his own. Like my own brothers did not know I had a different dad until my 21st birthday. That's how close we were. But I was desperate to prove that I was good enough so that he wouldn't leave me the way my biological dad eventually did. So, became an overachieving, people-pleasing perfectionist, which is not a great way to live. You might have a lot of success and be high functioning, but inside I absolutely hated myself. It all kind of came to a head. I always say that God directed me to go to Australia so he could break me down with no family around to support me, to build me back up. So
Mm.
I was in Australia. I had been dating somebody for 3 years. On the day I found out I was pregnant, I found out that he had a girlfriend in another state. In the coming weeks, I found out he was actually a compulsive liar, and most of what I thought was true over our 3 year relationship was not. He went as far as forging bank statements. That's the level of compulsive liar that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And so I was so humiliated because I had always seen myself as being like this super intelligent, like, nobody can get their BS past me person. And I fell hook, line, and sinker for all of these lies. So a couple weeks after all of this happened, I miscarried the baby. I had not told anybody I was pregnant. So I went through the miscarriage completely alone on my bathroom floor. And that really like plunged me into depths of darkness that I didn't know existed up until that point, which sounds kind of crazy given my childhood. But so there was a Friday afternoon. I got out of a business meeting. I'm standing on the corner of downtown Melbourne, city of like 5 million people. People are laughing and joking and talking about their weekend plans and their future plans. And I'm just in this place of like, I don't know how I get this pain to ever go away. Like it feels like every day it grows, it's not shrinking. And so in that moment, I committed to a well-timed step out into traffic so that it would look like an accident, but I wouldn't have to feel the pain anymore. Mentally committed to taking the step. When I physically went to move, it's like my feet were rooted to the ground. And I really felt like God was just like, I'm not done with you yet. So I did all the things you're supposed to do. Went to therapy, which was good for understanding that I had been abused in childhood. Up until then, and I see people do this a lot. Well, it wasn't that bad, right? It wasn't all the time. Somebody else had it worse than me. And so we minimize our own abuse or our own trauma, our own adversity, to not be the victim. And sometimes just being like, you know what? Little me, like my younger self, survived a lot. That in itself can be really freeing. Um, and then I did the rah-rah events, the accountability groups, all of that, and nothing was changing. I worked with coach after coach after coach, and they just kept telling me, you can't change the past, just focus on the future. And I was like, I've done that for 30 years. I wanted to kill myself. I hate myself. So that's not a winning strategy. There's got to be a different way. And I very randomly found NLP, hypnosis, and somatic release tools, and they profoundly changed my life to the point where I was like, I have to share this. Like, I can't not share this with the world. I also had a gift for being able to do it with other people. So I've been doing that ever since. It's been almost 10 years now that I've been doing that work. Yeah, so that's how I got here.
Yeah, and that's how I got here. Oh, there's so gosh, like I'm just taking a moment for you and for anyone else that just felt the weight of your story. Like thank you for sharing so vulnerably. Thank you for just being here. And you said say like you were firsthand victim, right? Like you that first piece and like you see like you painted that picture so beautifully and beautifully you might not be like, oh, that's not the right word. But to where you are now to where you were, like when people say you can't change the past, it's like, okay, maybe I cannot change the past. However, there is a lot of the past that we hold within our bodies. And when people say things like that, or like time heals everything, no, it doesn't actually. Like when
Yeah.
people say those things, it's like I understand intentions might be there. However, let's bring it back to the compassion, the empathy, the not minimizing, and to actually be in wholeness of what you went through or are going through. And I just thank you so much for sharing all of that because that's beautifully, like you painted that picture so beautifully.
I think it's important to share because so many people in my experience have had crappy situations. Maybe it wasn't to the level that I had, right? My husband, and he's okay with me to share this story. He grew up in the quote unquote perfect family, right? Like your stereotypical Southern Bible Belt family where, two blonde sisters, both straight A students, both, gymnasts and cheerleaders and whatnot, mom, dad with the perfect house that was always clean, everything looked amazing, financially secure. He was a good baseball player until he quit. But I mean, he didn't realize that he had had adverse experiences until he met me because he was like, I was basically always told to like sit down, shut up.
Yeah.
Like you're too loud. Stop asking so many questions, stop talking so much, tone down the energy. And so I think when we start sharing these stories, people can realize like, oh, maybe what I went through was normal, but it wasn't healthy,
Yeah.
right? Maybe I'm not being ungrateful by recognizing like my parents couldn't meet my needs. And this isn't like about blaming mom and dad, right? Like, while I'm not excusing what my stepmom did to me, I can also see that she was in a state of survival
Yep.
and me getting attention because I was this blonde-haired, blue-eyed, big blue-eyed girl who loved to put on shows and who the spotlight naturally fell on,
Mhm.
took attention away from her, which could, at a primal level, threatened her survival.
Yep.
My step or my biological dad, even though I'm fairly confident he was emotionally abusive, he was the first man who never physically laid a hand on her. So that was a step up in her safety,
Yeah.
right? And so you know, we can recognize our parents didn't know. Like the research wasn't even out then, right? Up until the 90s, researchers thought that emotions were just this annoying thing that impaired our cognition, our thinking. So we don't have to blame our parents, but we can also still recognize like, hey, maybe we didn't get our needs met as
Yep.
like human beings. And it's not their fault. They did the best that they could with the resources and knowledge they had at the time. And now we know different, so we can heal and stop perpetuating the cycle.
Yeah, exactly. A couple things. You have you ever heard of Dr. Gabor Mate?
Yes, love him.
Yeah, I know. Oh gosh. Well, and so much, I mean, of his work, obviously, it just parallels our work also. But he made a quote, and I'm probably going to butcher it. I'm making it up based on what he said. I can't remember exactly. But he says, like, your past is your past. However, it's your responsibility to now impact your present and your future in terms of
Yeah.
bringing that peace. It's not about forgetting, forgiving what was done to you. And you kind of painted that picture. It's not like you're forgiving or forgetting what your stepmother did to you. However, now it's your responsibility to take that inner peace and that healing to reach that sovereignty within your life. Totally butchered
Yeah.
that. I'm picturing exactly where I read it. I want to go back and look at it. But,
Yeah.
in terms of that, and he also says, like it's not the addiction, it's why the pain, right? Like it's not why the addiction, but why the pain. Like let's get to that
Yeah.
root piece of things and something else. So I want to kind of compare you and your husband, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And I want to shed light and ask you kind of what your insight is on this with, okay, like thinking of your husband's upbringing and thinking of your upbringing, right?
Hmm.
This paints that perfect picture of two completely different scenarios, right? However, both possibly have holding trauma within their present life. And that really paints that piece of when your nervous system is at a capacity. Like two different people can have the same experience. Two of the same people can be experiencing a situation. One could process it in that moment, and the other one may not have had that safety within their body and they weren't able, and then it got stuck. So, can you speak on that nervous system capacity in terms of like in the moment when it could possibly be stuck or unprocessed versus processing?
Yeah. So I think of our nervous system like a container, right? So like I've got this jar of iced coffee. The more full my container is, the less capacity I have to process anything new. What
Mm,
most people don't realize is that that container, our container holds every unresolved negative emotion we've ever had, which for most of us is every negative emotion we've ever had because most of us didn't learn because again, the research just wasn't there back then, right? Now, I think it's also important to differentiate between like big T traumas and little t traumas, which are not the name that I've given them. I despise the names because I think it minimizes the little t's, but the big T traumas is what most people think of,
yep.
right? It's the physical abuse, it's the sexual abuse, it's the war, whether you go to war as like in the military or maybe the country that you live in breaks out in war. It's natural disaster.
Yep.
It is witnessing or personally experiencing death or dismemberment. Those kind of make up the bulk of the big T traumas. Little T traumas I've found are more likely to be swept under the rug as like, well, this is just part of life, right? Your little T traumas are things like the emotional abuse or the financial abuse. It can also be living in like scarcity, poverty situations where you don't know where you're going to get your next meal. That one kind of borders on big T, depending on how bad it was.
Yep.
But it's also things like getting the cold shoulder, right? My mom used to give me the silent treatment all the time when I was growing up if I made her mad. That's a little T trauma. Uh, Things like triangulation. So the other thing that happened a lot in my family was if my mom got mad at me, she would tell my brothers her side of the story first and my dad. So it would be like a 4-on-1 situation, right? They'd get people on their sides. I had friends in school who did that as well. Um, it's the parentification. Whereas kids, we feel like we either get put in charge of our siblings, so now we have to become the parent to our siblings because we're the oldest, or we feel like we have to take care of our parents. My mom had debilitating anxiety, like I said, so I felt like I couldn't share what was going on when I was being bullied at school, when I was being abused by my stepmom. I couldn't share those things.
Yeah.
I had to parent her and hold the weight of that myself, right? If you had a parent who had an addiction, a physical health condition, a mental health condition, you had a parent who was emotionally unavailable. Maybe you had a parent who just couldn't look after you, and you were like, I have clients who were like, why? If I didn't cook for myself, then I didn't eat, right? I was like 6 and I had to cook for myself. So, though that parentification is a little T trauma.
Mhm.
The constant criticism, catastrophizing mistakes, always being compared to somebody else, having a parent who, you know, negates your needs to people please others or negates your needs to be the perfectionist. Like the little T traumas, in my opinion, fill the cup faster because it's like death by a thousand cuts. It's not like a, oh, I was in this hurricane and it destroyed my house one time, right? One
Right.
event that adds a chunk. And I'm not downplaying big T traumas, but I had this one chunk that filled my cup. It's like a constant daily add to the cup that now it's full and overflowing.
Yep.
So the more our cup is holding, the less capacity we have to process through things. The longer we carry a full cup, the heavier it becomes. This is called allostatic load on our nervous system. So we go hiking a lot here in the Smoky Mountains. I'm often the one who's carrying my son because he's a mama's boy. So he's a lot lighter when we're leaving on a 5-mile hike than he is halfway through and than he is when we get back to the car, right? The longer I carry him, the heavier I get. And it's the same thing with our emotional baggage, our trauma, our any abuse, anything like that. All of the stuff that we're holding on to, the longer we carry it, the heavier it becomes and the more likely it is to make us like physically sick in our
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
And so when we start working with people, this is why we are so big on nervous system regulation is regulating the nervous system is going to clear out a little bit of space at the top. Now we can use the hypnosis and the other techniques to start going deeper into releasing and healing that deeper trauma.
Yep.
And the goal is, I think the other thing worth noting is like people are like, well, my goal is to empty my cup, to get my container completely empty. That's not the goal. The goal is to have enough space that when adversity pops up, you have space to process it without like exploding, right? Without collapsing into a freeze response, into depression, into a panic attack. It's to have the flexibility. It's not that we never want to feel anger again. It's that we don't want 30, 40, 50 years of anger to come spewing out in a moment where maybe it's not really called for,
Yeah.
right? So that's the goal is to get enough space in the cup that we have flexibility of our responses instead of being reactive because the cup's full and overflowing.
Yeah, that's a beautiful explanation. And to kind of piggyback and go a little more deeper, let's talk like with patterns, with perfectionism, with guilt, with burnout. How can, unresolved traumas or just experiences in your past really drive those triggers of perfectionism and living in that guilt or burnout?
It's funny that you bring this up because I'm doing a series on this on TikTok right now, and it is crazy to me how many people will comment on the videos being like, so I did a video the other day that said the adult who's the perfectionist is the child who had every one of their mistakes catastrophized.
Mm.
And we've gotten three types of responses. First type is like, yep, this was totally me. Second type is like, or maybe I'm just a Virgo. And I'm like, look, I'm all for like understanding your astrology, but when you use it to justify your limiting patterns, there's an issue.
Right.
And then the third was the people who are like, stop being a victim. Your childhood has nothing to do with your present. And I'm like, the neuroscience actually isn't even on your side in that case. Like,
Yeah.
study after study after study shows that your childhood absolutely impacts who you are as an adult. So, the other thing I want to note as we get into this is like all of these patterns, perfectionism, procrastination, people pleasing, all of the patterns that you have that disempower you or that hold you back now, they were a survival strategy. You created that strategy to survive a time where you felt you either wouldn't be loved or that you wouldn't be safe. And those are our two, like, we have six core human needs, but those are the two most important.
Yeah.
We have to feel safe and we have to feel loved and connected, accepted by our tribe, which equals safety, right? So I became the perfectionist because I thought that if I was perfect, that my stepdad would love me and wouldn't leave me,
Hmm.
right? So it was a survival strategy. Now, the thing about humans is that success is kryptonite. And a mentor said this to me a couple years ago, and they were talking about like business success. Like if I find success financially in my business by hustling, then I'll just continue to hustle and I won't be open to other ways of success. But I've realized that it goes so much deeper. Like the ultimate success is surviving, right? That's what our nervous system cares about, is us surviving. So if I am a perfectionist in one moment, and I'm rewarded for that, I don't die and I get love because of it, then my nervous system says, this is a winning strategy. Let's continue it.
Uh,
And when you repeat that every day over 30 years, you have 30 years worth of evidence. Evidence, I'm going to use that term loosely, but you have 30 years of evidence that that strategy works, even though it's causing you to play small in certain areas of your life or not hit your goals or whatever. We're not naturally wired to thrive. We're wired to survive,
Yep.
to get love and to get safety. Can we reprogram ourselves to thrive? Absolutely. But we have to first have some, I think that recognition and that perception shift of, hey, I created perfectionism, or I created people pleasing, or I created playing small, I created being the invisible person, I created the empath identity or pattern as a survival strategy. Like my inner child, my nervous system, my subconscious mind was coming from the ultimate place of self-love when it created that strategy. So I don't have to shame myself for it.
Hmm.
I can have compassion for the version of me that had to create that pattern, and I can recognize that it's time to let it go.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings in so much of like the honoring the shadows and the light and honoring all parts of you because when we are in that perfectionism or in that guilt or burnout cycle, what do we do? You said that like can suppress other pieces of yourself. I mean, you could maybe. like outwardly living your life, you're not focusing on other areas of your life and you're focusing just on that perfectionism to where other parts are being kind of neglected a little bit, but ultimately we're suppressing the other feelings or the other triggers or other experiences that are coming up because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's about recognizing like where whatever behavior we're showing is showing you the highest level of resources and knowledge that that person can access in that moment,
Yeah.
right? So like my stepmom, her abusing me was the highest level. She was in fight mode, right? Like in the ultimate fight mode, like it's you or me, survival mode, right? That ultimate shadow that nobody wants to admit that they have.
Yeah.
Does it make it okay that she abused a little kid? No, but that was the highest level of resources and knowledge that she could access in that moment. Right. So one of the principles that we work from within NLP is you can accept the person without accepting the behavior
Yeah.
and like differentiating the two. This is one of the biggest things that we do when we're raising our son is like we don't make the idea we're very aware and careful of any identity statements we make with him, right? So like me growing up, whenever I acted out, it was like you're being a bad girl, right? So now that becomes part of my identity if you hear it enough. Whereas we'll say to him, you're a good boy, right? You're a good person, and this behavior is not okay.
Yeah.
We love you. This, you're a good person, and this behavior is not okay. We need to find a better behavior right now. We
Mhm.
need to find a better way to manage these emotions right now. But none of us had that because we didn't have the research growing up.
Exactly, exactly. And I mean, bringing in like generational pieces, like even think of our parents, the generation prior to that. Like, if you want to get stereotypical, just think of the generation before us. They probably were fighting within poverty or survival in a different capacity to when now their adulthood, they're like maybe the picket fence, the I want the modern family look because I didn't have that when I was growing up. So then I'm struggling with the perfectionism. And it's just like when you look at those generational stereotypes, again, I'm going to say that term loosely now, but like when
Yeah.
you're using looking at the different generations and it's like it's just it makes so much sense and maybe that's just me going down a different rabbit hole but
No, it totally does. So my grandma was born in 1928. So she lived through the Great Depression, right?
yeah
And the moment I realized this pattern when I was in college, or when I graduated college. So obviously, Great Depression, there's not just a supermarket that you can wander down to and get fresh fruits and vegetables. So during that time, there was a lot of canned foods. So when my mom was growing up, there was a lot of canned foods in her pantry. So when I was growing up, when my mom was an adult, there was a lot of canned foods in my pantry. When I went to college, when I moved out for the first time, I'll never forget, I went and bought like $297 worth of canned foods that sat in my pantry for 5 years of college. And maybe when I was drunk, when I came home one night, I opened like a can of beans or something to
yeah
eat. But the rest of that $297 worth of cans sat there for 5 years. And I was like, wow, like, because I don't eat that way, right? I eat fresh, like whole foods. And so but I realized when I was having to like donate it all to the food bank or whatever I did with it, I was like, wow, like this is coming from my grandma who lived during the Great Depression, potentially even before that, right? Like I
yeah
don't know what her childhood was like. And then when I met my husband and I moved in with him, he was very much like, you know, he just ate out. He was not, did not know how to cook. So he just ate out. And so when we started buying stuff, he was like, well, don't we need like canned food for the pantry? And I'm like, no, like we don't eat that. So why would we put that in there? And he's like, well, what do you do with pantries then? And I was like, I don't know now. Like, uh, I don't know what I would do with that. Now I bake sourdough and stuff, so mine's full of flour and stuff. But back then I didn't. So it's just crazy, like the evolution and seeing like the
yeah
patterns of where you're supposed to put canned foods in the pantry because that's how I grew up, right?
yeah exactly
And
exactly
if it's impacting what's in our pantries, how is it impacting like the other things that we do and how we show up in life?
thank you for saying that because it's so I mean, you don't learn this shit in school. And it's like, I'm not a part of the school board, but I'm in like an anti-bully committee within my son, my oldest is 6. But I'm in like committees and PTO and all that stuff. And I'm really pushing for like well-being, foundational. Let's get some more mental health, emotion. And of course, they have health class and guidance class. I understand that. But I could go on a whole tangent of that. Like, why aren't we learning this in school? And that was a perfect example
Yeah.
of if it's like this, in this capacity, what do you think about emotions and generational traumas and patterns and bringing in our DNA? Like, oh, I love merging like the science, the biology piece with the energy piece because it is
Yeah.
so intertwined.
They are. And I mean the science like I'm big in the woo-woo, but I every piece of woo-woo that I've ever looked into, there is a study to back it, right?
Yeah,
And it's just like so crazy. I mean, there I have worked with so many we've decided to homeschool. Both me and my husband were bullied in school. There's just so much less that we can control
yeah,
in a school situation, right? So we're lucky to live in an area where there's a lot of homeschool co-ops and a lot of like youth sports. So we can still get the socialization piece in, but you've got teachers who are going to have their own stuff, and we don't have any control over whether or not they heal that. I have worked with so many clients. I ran, when I lived in Australia, I ran this workshop, and there was this guy in the back row. And every time a question was asked, I could tell he knew the answer, but he would not raise his hand.
yeah.
And so on one of the breaks, I went over and I said, I can see that you know the answers. Like, how come you're not participating? And he was like, well, when I was in grade one, this man is in his 60s. When I was in grade one, I was sitting in the front row of the class and the teacher asked a question. I raised my hand. I was like, oh, pick me, pick me. And so she came to me and I got the answer wrong. And she belittled me in front of the whole class. And I have not put my hand up ever since then.
Hmm.
So, like from grade one to your 60s, how many opportunities and things have you missed out on because you don't want what that teacher did, right? You don't know how the parents are raising their kids and how they're going to bring that to school, right? So, we've chosen to homeschool for that because there's just so much stuff. And I'm like, especially during this 0 to 7 imprinting age, like we want to be as in control as possible around what
Yeah.
goes in for him because that's going to become his inner voice.
Yeah, exactly. And my gosh, you shared an example, real life example. I've recorded or I've shared this masterclass to this podcast. I shared an example. I was doing a shame masterclass, and that was the example I shared. When you are, just imagine, because it was like that little t trauma again, like you don't want to put that big T, little t, but that is the extent of how imprints can be imprinted within your body. I shared that example. You raise your hand, you look around and maybe your teacher's back was turned or they did belittle you or, the class is laughing. And then you go home and possibly you didn't get that support at home to process that. And then that imprint gets stuck. And then that shame cycle, it's so generalizing, right? Like it's not like you mentioned that your nervous system is trained for survival. So it turns into like, not, oh, okay, I got, an answer wrong. It turns into I am wrong. I am
Yeah.
worthless. Like it's so generalizing. And I shared this because there's magic in repair. Like there is. And I know that that's the work that you do. That's the work that I do. Like there's magic in repair. Because so often I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like gonna fuck my kids up. Or I'm like whatever might happen or all these things. But it's I always get so in my head sometimes with like, okay, thinking so many different layers of this is the experience that let's say my son had at school today. How's the best, scenario for me to approach this? Because there's this is he getting imprinted with shame? Am I helping him process this? Like there's so many layers, right? That you don't want to do it wrong, but there's always that magic in repair and coming back to the love and the connection and the safety that you said from the very beginning. Like to our listeners, that's why I'm kind of, really
Yeah.
segueing into this. To the listeners listening to this, there's always that piece when you are showing that safety, when you're showing that love and connection. You're not going to get it perfect
No,
every time, right?
no. And I mean, we, knowing all that we do, still don't get it wrong. We still have days where we're dysregulated or where we're overwhelmed or whatever. I think there's also magic in having someone demonstrate for you what owning their crap looks like and like taking accountability, right? I
Yeah.
never heard my parents say, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. And
Yeah.
my husband's parents never said that either. And so, it was always like justification or defending or I'm sorry you feel that way, right? Like these
Yeah.
non-apologies. I'm sorry you feel that way, not I'm sorry that my behavior was out of line.
Right.
And so from the moment my son was born, I said to my husband, if we mess up, we are apologizing.
Yeah.
And my husband was like, well, he can't even understand. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like
Yeah.
even now as a newborn, when he can't understand, we are still going to apologize because it's going to give us practice apologizing
Yeah.
to a newborn who's absolutely not going to judge us. We get to experience, oh, it's safe to apologize in this moment. But also that becomes the pattern within the family. It
Yeah.
becomes his norm, right? So if I am, overstimulated, dysregulated, and I snap at my son or my husband, I apologize. I'm sorry that I snapped at you.
Yeah.
You deserve better than that, right? I like because I think the other big thing, and maybe you've seen this on social media, anytime I talk about that Gabor Mate quote of we're not, it's not our fault what happened to us, but it's our responsibility how we choose to move forward. There's always somebody in the comments who's like, oh, so now we're victim blaming. And I'm like, none of this is about victim
Right.
blaming, but it's about recognizing that you can continue to give power to something that happened, or you can choose to heal from it and move forward,
Right.
right? And we do live in a society that kind of celebrates the victim, right? And encourages people to stay the victim mentality because if you're the victim, other people have more control over you. You don't
Yeah.
have you're not in your power. And so a lot of times I'll talk to people and we'll talk about, taking ownership, taking accountability. There's a book by, what's his name? I think it's called Total Ownership. It's by a military guy. I can't remember his name right now. But he basically talks about like everything that happens in your life. How would you respond if you were like, this is 100% on me?
Yeah.
Right. And what I've noticed is that a lot of people have, because we live in such a shame-based society, a lot of people have such a hard time differentiating like accountability and ownership from blame and fault,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Which is super shame-based. So if I take 100% ownership and I'm like, okay, what was my role in this? Right. And even going as far back as my childhood, like I was told a story once that Plato wrote about the myth of Ur, how there was this prince named Ur, and he died in this battlefield, and he went up to heaven, and he met this angel, and the angel basically told him, like, before you came to earth, your soul chose your life's purpose and you chose your parents. Most of us have to overcome the influence of our parents to reach our purpose, right? Tony Robbins tells a story about two identical twin brothers that were raised by an alcoholic father. One goes on to become an alcoholic, one becomes a super successful businessman. They're
Yep.
both interviewed, why do you think your life turned out this way? And they both answer, because I was raised by my father,
Yeah.
right? So we either succumb to the influence or we overcome it. So we choose our parents, we choose our body, right? And maybe our body has health complications that we have to overcome to achieve our purpose. We choose the most negative things to happen to us that we have to overcome to hit our purpose.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm like, if I like zoom way, way out and take ultimate accountability, maybe my soul chose those childhood experiences so that I could gain the tools that I have now to help other people transform their life. And I
Yeah.
know not everybody's ready for like that level, but how we look at things now is like, how can we separate accountability from blame and shame, right? We don't have to, everybody makes mistakes. Like, we don't look at a kid learning to walk who falls over going, oh, you're such an idiot. You better just give up now. But somehow, somewhere along our journey, it becomes acceptable to say it to ourselves.
Right.
And so if we start to separate the shame out from the accountability and the ownership, then we can heal and move forward a lot faster.
Yeah, exactly. And to stay on like the tools, the resources conversation, final question here. Like, what are some just tangible ways in the moment to process or to regulate your nervous system in the moment? Like chaotic kid or day with the kids, or you're stressed at work, like what are some tactics or tangible ways that you share?
Yeah, so I find that our subconscious mind is a lot like a child sometimes, right? So there might be emotions that come up in the moment that you're like, I do not have the ability to deal with this. We took my son to the water park the other day and he ran off for like there was like a 5 to 10 minute period where we did not know where he was. Not the time to process my fear in that
Yeah.
moment, right? So our subconscious mind, you know, if you're in the school pickup line and you're feeling super triggered and angry, you can make the deal with your subconscious mind, hey, now's not the time to process this. Can we come back to it tonight? The thing is, you have to make sure you come back to it. You have to carve out that reflection time. The fastest way in the moment to like make that deal and to regulate is through your breath. Like you deep breaths, belly breaths. There's tons of techniques, the physiological side, box breathing, vagal breathing, all of those things. They all work, but the biggest thing is the deep, like breathe into your belly, engage the diaphragm, feel your belly expanding, slow down the exhale, make the exhale longer than the inhale. That's the fastest way in the moment that we can pull ourselves out of that emotional brain, access some of the logical brain so that we can decide what is the outcome that I want here. And this is going to take a little bit longer in the beginning, so I would recommend practicing it to build that muscle memory. But start asking yourself, like, what is the outcome that I want here? And then how do I respond? How do I communicate? How do I act and show up in this moment to get that outcome? And a lot of people are like, well, that's manipulative, but like that's how we become the creator of our life,
Mm,
right? What's the outcome that I want here? And how do I need to communicate? How do I need to show up to ensure that we get as close to that outcome as possible?
yeah. Great. Great example. So where can we find you? What services do you offer? Where can we support you?
Yeah, absolutely. So our podcast is the Cycle Breaker Show. We're on all the podcast platforms. On Facebook, if you look up Tiffany Toombs Clevinger, you'll find me on TikTok and Instagram. We are Real Cycle Breaker. But everything that we do is around breaking the cycle. So reach out to us and we're happy to support you on the journey.
I appreciate your time so much. Thank you for being here with us today, Tiffany. And to our listeners, I'll link everything in the show notes. So until next week, our dear listeners, simply be you. You have everything inside of you to learn your energy of alignment and be unapologetic in who you are. We are sending our love and light.
Did you find this episode free or empowering? Please read my review. Tickle, 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 boop.
Thank you for spending the sacred time with me on Naturally Empowered Living. If this episode brought you closer to stepping into your energy of alignment, I'd love for you to leave a written review and share how this show has supported your journey. Your feedback truly lights me up and helps others find the space of transformation. And sharing it with someone who might need it spreads the ripple of healing even further. Be sure to check the show notes for ways to connect with me and explore personalized healing sessions and mentorships to deepen your self-awakening journey. Thank you. I appreciate all you are and all you do.